Welcome to Next Time podcast. My name is Sundar. I lead the forensic services at Next Time. This podcast is part of Global Anti-Corruption Compliance series. Our podcast is an endeavor to bring emerging topics of relevance for executives across spectrum of services we offer. Hope you enjoy the podcast. Across the geographies, regulatory environments are changing, business practices are changing, and behaviors are changing with COVID. Anti-corruption in the current environment is bringing new dimensions with issues around supply chain, healthcare, and other reporting requirements. There are regulatory interventions, and there is a whole new virtual world which is evolving as we speak now. In this podcast series, we will be interviewing specialists across regions to gather specific insights on anti-corruption in current times. The region that we're going to be covering today is Central Europe and Western Balkan. Today we have Tomislav. Tomislav is the principal and founder of ŠunjkaLaw. He has represented clients across anti-corruption, commercial arbitrations, and other criminal proceedings. He has been a representative of Europe in the IBA Anti-Corruption Committee. He is currently a member of Subcommittee of Asset Recovery in the IBA. Welcome to the show, Tomislav. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Sundar. It's my pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Great. Tomislav, as we're speaking now, there's a lot of changes that has happened in the market and because of COVID, and we are actually looking at specific issues that are impacting mostly from the anti-corruption perspective. How do you perceive corruption risks in the current environment?
Thank you, Sundar, for that. First of all, as you said, I'm principal and founder of a very specialized and focused law firm, ŠunjkaLaw, and I'm currently from Serbia. And I served as a representative for the Balkan, for the Serbia before the Anti-Corruption Committee of IBA. After that, I served for the entire Europe before the Anti-Corruption Committee. And I'm currently vice chair of the Asset Recovery Subcommittee. So I will try to give you answer and update from the Europe as a regional perspective. As you said, as countries face undeniable emergencies, concentration of powers, derogation from fundamental rights and freedoms, and as large amount of money are infused into the economy to elevate the crisis at the moment and in the near future. I perceive corruption risk in the current environment as much higher than in ordinary course of business.
Perfect. I understand. So, of course, there's a lot of changes in terms of corruption perception at this point in time. Do you see specific risks that have come in because of COVID-19 in the region that you operate in or the region that you represent?
For sure. Some corruption risks are immediate due to action taken to mitigate the health and economic crisis. Other risks will emerge in the medium to long term as a consequences and impact of COVID-19. I would like to start with health and health procurement sector. Bribery in the healthcare sector makes medical service more expensive and of lower quality. It leads to unequal access to medical care, especially by the more vulnerable population. It also undermines patient trust in the health service and may cause serious harm to individuals. The COVID-19 outbreak increases corruption risk. For sure, the health sector is particularly exposed because of the immediate needs for medical supplies and hence simplification, even suspension of the procurement rules. Overcrowded medical facilities and overburdened medical staff. Various typology of corruption in the health sector like bribery and medically related service, corruption in the new product research and development, including the conflict of interest and the role of the lobbying COVID-19 related fraud. Governments enact legislation to respond to COVID-19 by assuring that their health system are properly equipped. In many countries, public procurement rules are suspended because of state of emergency. Procurement systems are become vulnerable targets for lobbyists. Petty bribery is also an issue that has emerged again in the pandemic context for access of priority, access to medical service, tests, equipments, body collection, quarantine rules. Even in the countries where this was very uncommon, really West countries, we have another corruption risk related to new product research and development. Because another important process vulnerable to corruption is investment in the research and development of drugs and vaccination against the COVID-19. A huge amount of money are being invested in research and development. The same can be said of greater risk of conflict of interest when health or economic interests are of major stake. preferentially treatment in delivery of service for friends or for family or members of nepotism and favorism in the recruitment. Inside training is also an area of risk and is particularly important for those who, because of their position, have access to the very privileged information. After that, we have risk of the related fraud related with COVID-19. Different financial scams related to COVID-19, including in relation to falsified medical product with masks and another medical suppliers in high demand yet difficulty to occur as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The offer from the fake shops, website, social media accounts and email address claiming to sell these items has grown exponentially online. Unsuspect victims have seen their money disappear into the hands of the criminal involved. This money is after that, or for sure thereafter, laundered. Such a criminal act is manufacturing of counterfeiting medical products, supplying or offering to supply, and trafficking and counterfeiting medical products, falsification of documents, manufacturing, the keeping the stock of supply, importing, exporting, etc., etc. I also want to underline that private sector faces increased corruption risk during this crisis. This risk includes facilitation payment, bribes to push ahead process they may have stalled due to the shortage of the staff or closure of the public offices, falsification of documents to meet the condition of state's aid, schemes for pandemic relief measure, bypassing product certification requirement, non-certification of alternative supply chain, donation, lack of resources to supervise misconduct by the individual employees, etc., etc. I would also like to underline one specific new risk in the COVID time. This is risk related with the state aid, economy stimulants, subsidy, tax credit and holidays. So, accountability and control of the economic recovery measure should take the place. Anti-corruption risk should be integrated through the program design and delivery phases in the areas of economy stimulus, subsidies, official development assistance and export credits. Actual instance of corruption and bribery should be addressed comprehensively using the whole state system and government approach where is possible and unavoidable tone from the top.
That's absolutely. I think there is a lot of points that have come in from that particular comment of yours. So it actually covers aspects of how public procurement issues that exist, how there are issues relating to procurements associated with be it masks or essentials that are happening at this point in time. PPEs and masks, there's a lot of corruption that is there. I understand that this is also prominent in the region that you represent and operate in, and if we're also speaking about petty corruptions and specific issues in R&D, corruption issues that are perceived in R&D. That's a lot of very insightful information, Tomislav. I just wanted to just extend this question to the next point. Now that the countries are either are doing remote working, releasing from lockdown, operating in different spaces where there are limitations in number of people who could gather. Given this context, do you see certain risks to get enhanced further in the region that you operate in, besides the ones that we have spoken, or do you see any risks that you think is going to expand further even in the current time where people connect digitally?
My opinion related with that is that this part of the Europe was not ready for the remote working because of lack of digitalization. So I can say that lockdown measure was very rigid, even military. Self-isolation measure was extended from 14 to 28 days, and it was several time measure completely locked down from the 96 till 110 hours. This was psychologically very hard. In the same moment, it was media freedom issues, so lack of proper information, not transparency during the lockdown. If I can say, the risk what will be extend after COVID time will be risk related with economy. So huge money from the different sources, grants, funds, plans will be transferred to economy, public sector, but also private sector. So control mechanism should be done.
Absolutely. Grants being a specific area of risks in the subsequent future is an interesting thought. Of course, almost all economies are releasing grants, and there are tax rebates that are provided by respective geographies, respective governments. I'm sure there are issues of corruption associated with that because there are new government touch points that are going to evolve to avail those benefits. I can completely relate to what you are mentioning. I just want to extend this to another point. How do you see now that all these changes are happening and all these impacts are perceived across the market? And the government will also be noticing this, right? The anti-corruption agencies in the respective geographies will also be looking at making enforcements, right? What are your perspectives regarding possibilities of enforcement in short term or medium term? Short term, I mean about 3 to 6 months. Medium term, I mean 6 months to 1 year or 1.5 years range. What kind of actions do you expect from the regulatory agencies, and the kind of regulatory changes that are expected, considering there is a relaxation in the way public procurements are handled and there is a lot of grants coming in across?
I'm quite sure that international organizations like International Monetary Fund and World Bank and subsidy of them, who will actually will be generator and engine for the delivering of the grant, will set up proper integrity process and will set up process of control. So at the moment, this is still a state of emergency time in some countries post state of the emergency time, but in the future will be much more regulated and an ordinary course of business. So I think that general anti-corruption program, general international anti-corruption also will take place.
Yeah, perfect. So do you expect more enforcement coming in during this particular period? Is that expected, considering there is a lot of action in the market?
Certainly. I do.
Perfect. Yeah. So that's an interesting note because, of course, the regulators will also be active to see how they are able to address this side of corruption, which may be extending at this point. I just wanted to ask you, as we come on to the final leg of the podcast, what are the 3 or 4 things that you think a compliance officer should consider dealing with in their respective geographies in the current environment, specifically with reference to anti-corruption risk?
As we all know, the transparency is key to prevent corruption. This includes the oversight and accountability in the time of these extraordinary circumstances because of the pandemic. These tools are more important than ever. Therefore, it will be necessary to increase the capacity and authority of compliance function completely. Merit-based recruitment and promotion, working condition and means, code of conduct and conflict of interest prevention, integrity and checking mechanism are relevant here. Compliance function should develop a strategy to improve integrity and the management of conflict of interest with respect to persons entrusted with the top execution function, including through responsive advisory, monitoring and compliance mechanism. I will recommend that all contract of person entrusted with the top executive function, with lobbyists especially, and other third parties who seek influence of government decision making are duly reported, including contacts, not contracts, contact with the legal and authorized representative of the companies.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Go on.
Compliance officers should push accounting and auditing, corporate liability, and strict implementing of compliance programs and due diligence obligation. They should ensure that good governance and internal control are maintained using a risk-based approach. Responsible authorities may wish to remind actors of their legal obligation and consequences of not complying with the law. This use of business intermediaries needs to be carefully considered, particularly when shifting the new markets and manufacturing, supply chains and export. Facilitation payments should be discouraged and fully prohibited. And last but not least, whistleblowers are critical and must be protected. The use of existing reporting mechanisms should be encouraged, and reports of misconduct must be taken seriously and investigated.
Fantastic. That looking at if I read through what you said, basically, you're saying that the basics needs to be clearly adhered to. The basics of policy, the basics of hiring right set of people, due diligences, and also looking at the process, including handling the whistleblower concerns and investigation and action should be clearly applied. I think this is a fair amount of insight that you've shared, Tomislav. I think I'm really grateful to you to have joined this podcast and have shared critical insights which are relevant for compliance officers operating in the region that you operate in. And I'm glad to have you here. Thanks a lot for sparing time.
Thank you, Sundar, for your invitation. Thank you for confidence in me.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.